I still remember the exact sound that envelope made when I tore it open, that dry little rip that somehow felt louder than it should have. Like the whole house had gone quiet just to hear what kind of trouble was waiting inside. It was a Thursday morning in late October, the kind of morning where the air smelled like wet leaves and somebody's chimney smoke. And I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee I hadn't even tasted yet. On the front of the envelope, stamped in dark blue ink, were the words, Willow Bend Homeowners Association. And right under that, in smaller letters, Compliance Department. Now, whenever a neighborhood volunteer committee starts calling itself a department, you already know you're in for nonsense. But this one was special. According to the letter, I owed $900 in immediate penalties, plus a new monthly visual congestion fee, because my driveway contained an excessive concentration of personal vehicles. 3 vehicles. That was the crime. My pickup, my wife's minivan, and my son's used Mustang, the one he bought with 2 summers of grocery store paychecks and more pride than money. 3 vehicles, all parked on concrete I paid for, in front of a house I paid for, on a street where half the board members had boats, golf carts, and decorative fountains shaped like dolphins. I read that letter twice, then laughed once, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I was going to walk outside and say something that would end up quoted in a police report. My wife, Marisol, looked up from the dining table, still in her nurse scrubs, her hair pulled back, eyes tired from a 12-hour shift. "Is it her again?" she asked. She didn't even have to say the name. Everyone in Willow Bend knew exactly who her was. Beverly Trask, HOA president, queen of the clipboard, ruler of mailbox colors, enemy of basketball hoops, and somehow always available to inspect other people's yards at 7:15 in the morning. I slid the letter across the table, and Marisol read the first paragraph, then slowly lowered it like it had offended her personally. "A visual congestion fee," she said. "What does that even mean?" I took a sip of coffee, finally, and said, "It means Beverly learned a new phrase." Just then, through the kitchen window, I saw her. There she was on the sidewalk in her cream-colored cardigan, oversized sunglasses, and white sneakers that had never seen honest dirt in their lives. She had her clipboard tucked under one arm and her phone held out in front of her, taking pictures of my driveway like she had discovered a crime scene. She leaned a little to the left, then a little to the right, trying to get the angle just dramatic enough. I swear, if she'd had yellow tape, she would have wrapped it around my truck. I stepped onto the porch, still holding the letter. "Morning, Beverly." She turned with that smile people use when they're already writing your punishment in their head. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer. I assume you received the board's notice?" "I did," I said. I especially enjoyed the part where my son's car became a threat to community harmony. Her smile twitched. "Rules keep neighborhoods desirable." "Funny," I said. "I always thought neighbors did that." She lowered her sunglasses just enough to look me straight in the eyes. "Let me be very clear. This isn't a farm lot. This isn't some rental street. Willow Bend has standards." There it was. That little sentence under the sentence. "People like you should feel lucky to be here." She never said it out loud, but she didn't have to. I'd heard it in different voices my whole life. From bank managers who looked at my work boots before my paperwork. From clients who called me buddy until they needed me to fix a 6-figure foundation problem. From men in pressed shirts who assumed quiet meant stupid. I folded the letter once, then again, and said, "You might want to be careful about standards, Beverly. Sometimes people start measuring back." She gave a soft little laugh. "There's an emergency board meeting tonight. 7 sharp. We'll be discussing additional action." Then she clicked her pen, made a note, and walked away like she'd just won something. I watched her go, and for the first time in months, I smiled for real. Because Beverly had no idea that for the last 6 years, while she was busy counting trash cans and measuring grass, I had been buying Willow Bend one house at a time. Now, I didn't start buying properties for revenge. That would make the story cleaner, I know, but real life is messier than that. I own a small construction and renovation company, and after the housing crash years ago, I learned the value of land the hard way. My dad lost our family home when I was 16 because a neighborhood association kept fining him over a shed he built for his tools. Not an illegal shed, not unsafe, just aesthetic noncompliance. They wore him down with fees, hearings, certified letters, and that special kind of smiling cruelty that hides behind bylaws. He sold at a loss and never really recovered from it. So when houses in Willow Bend started going up for sale, I bought the first one as an investment, then another, then two more. Some I rented to young families, some to retirees, some I kept empty until the right buyer came along. I used different holding companies because my accountant told me it was cleaner that way, and because, honestly, I like my privacy. Beverly just assumed I was another guy with a mortgage and a loud truck. She didn't know that by that Thursday morning, between my companies and partnership shares, I controlled just over 61% of the voting interest in the association. That afternoon, I sat in my office surrounded by file boxes, old meeting notes, printed emails, bank statements, and pictures neighbors had sent me over the years. There was Mrs. Delaney, fined $250 because her porch pumpkins were too rustic. There was Mr. Cho, a retired math teacher, fined for leaving his garage door open while he was carrying groceries inside. There was the Alvarez family, warned for having too many visitors during their daughter's graduation party. And then there were Beverly's friends, untouched. Beverly's best friend had a neon blue patio umbrella visible from the street for 3 years. Her brother-in-law parked a jet ski beside his garage every summer. Her treasurer, Dawn, had weeds tall enough to hide a mailbox, but somehow never got a letter. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast. This was different. This was cold, steady, focused. At 4:18 p.m., my attorney called and said, "Everything is in order. You can disclose tonight if you want to." I looked out the window at my son, Caleb, wiping dust off his Mustang, careful like it was a museum piece. And I thought about Beverly photographing that car like it was trash. "Yeah," I said. "Tonight." The clubhouse was packed by 6:55. Beverly had made sure of that. She wanted an audience. Folding chairs filled the room. People stood along the walls, and up front was a projector screen showing a blurry picture of my driveway, enlarged until my pickup looked like a monster truck. Beverly tapped her little wooden gavel, which she had no legal need for, but loved more than some people love their children. "This emergency meeting will come to order," she said, in that church lady voice that sounds polite until it cuts you. I sat in the back row beside Marisol, with my attorney 2 seats down and a leather folder on my lap. Beverly launched into her presentation. She called my driveway visually disruptive. She called my son's car an ongoing nuisance. She even had a slide titled Pattern of Vehicle Accumulation, which was just 3 pictures of the same 3 cars from different angles. A few of her loyal friends nodded like they were watching national security footage. Then she said, "If we allow this behavior, Willow Bend will lose its character." Mrs. Delaney whispered, "Character?" My pumpkins had more character than this board. I almost lost it right there. Beverly moved to the final slide, proposed corrective action. The board recommends an immediate fine, an ongoing monthly fee, and a new 2-vehicle driveway limit, with all additional vehicles stored inside garages only. Marisol leaned toward me and whispered, "Our garage has your equipment and my medical donation boxes." "I know," I said. Beverly looked right at us. "Some residents may need to make lifestyle adjustments. That is not the board's burden." That did it. I stood up. "Point of order." Beverly's face tightened. "You are not recognized." "I don't need to be recognized to raise a voting procedure issue under Section 8(4) of the association bylaws." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. People turned around. Beverly blinked, because bullies hate it when the target reads the rules. "Mr. Mercer," she said slowly, "this is not the time for theatrics." I walked down the center aisle, folder in hand. "I agree. So let's stick to facts." I placed the folder on the front table and opened it. "Before this board votes on new restrictions, members should know who actually holds the voting power in Willow Bend." Beverly laughed, sharp and nervous. "What is that supposed to mean?" I pulled out the first set of deeds. Pinehook Properties, Lot 12. Then another. Cedar Line Holdings, Lot 18. Another. North Mill Residential, Lots 21, 22, and 24. I kept going, one page after another, while the room got quieter and quieter. Don, the treasurer, stood up halfway, then sat back down like his knees had changed their mind. Beverly's husband, who usually hovered near the coffee machine pretending not to run half the board through her, rushed forward and whispered in her ear. Her face drained so fast I thought she might faint. I looked at the room, then back at Beverly. All those companies are mine, or controlled by me through recorded agreements. Together, they represent 61% of this association's voting interest. For about 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the room exploded. "You own that many houses?" someone shouted. "Is that legal?" someone else asked. My attorney stood calmly and said, "Completely legal, properly recorded, and fully verified." Beverly slapped her palm on the podium. "This is a hostile takeover." I looked at her and said, "No, Beverly. A hostile takeover is when someone uses power to scare people into silence. This is just math." That line traveled through the room like electricity. People started clapping, not everyone at first, but enough. Beverly grabbed her gavel and started banging it. "Order! Order!" Mrs. Delaney stood up, trembling but loud. "Where was order when you fined me for decorations my grandchildren made?" Mr. Cho raised a hand. "Where was order when you charged me for having my garage open for 12 minutes? Then Mrs. Alvarez stood, her voice breaking. "Where was order when you said our family parties made the neighborhood look crowded?" Beverly snapped. "This meeting is being hijacked." I turned to the screen and nodded to my attorney. He connected a laptop. The first image appeared, Beverly in my driveway at 5:43 a.m., crouched beside my truck with a ruler near my tire line. The next image, Beverly walking past Don's weed-filled yard without stopping. Then emails, screenshots, invoices. One showed HOA funds used to reimburse landscape consulting at Beverly's own address. Another showed private messages where she called certain residents low-standard problems. The room changed after that. It wasn't just drama anymore. It was proof. Beverly tried everything. She denied the emails, then blamed the secretary, then claimed the money was misunderstood, then said people were being emotional. But the more she talked, the worse it got. Finally, I said, "I am using the voting interest I control to call for immediate removal of the current board, appointment of an interim committee, a third-party financial audit, and suspension of all selective enforcement actions pending review." Beverly stared at me like I had spoken another language. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. "And I am." My voice shook a little on that last part, not from fear, but from all the years behind it. My father standing in our old driveway, trying not to cry while strangers judged his shed. My wife coming home exhausted and still worrying about fines. My son asking if he should sell the car he worked for because some woman with a clipboard didn't like how it looked. I looked Beverly right in the eyes and said, "You mistook patience for weakness. That was your mistake." The vote wasn't even close. Beverly's little kingdom collapsed in under 15 minutes. Don resigned before anyone asked him to. 2 other board members claimed they had always had concerns, which made half the room groan. Beverly stormed toward the exit, purse swinging, heels smacking the tile. At the door, she turned and said, "You people will regret this when property values drop." "Mrs. Delaney called back. Mine went up when I put the pumpkins out." Even Beverly's supporters laughed, and that was the moment I knew it was over. Not legally, not officially, not in paperwork terms, but in the way that matters. The fear was gone. The audit took 6 weeks. It found improper reimbursements, missing records, selective penalties, and enough embarrassing emails to keep the neighborhood group chat alive until Christmas. Beverly eventually sold her house and moved to a gated community 2 towns over, which, according to rumor, has a 4-page rule about acceptable wreath materials. Willow Bend changed too. Not into chaos, like Beverly predicted. Into a neighborhood. We still had rules, but they made sense. Keep your property safe, respect your neighbors, don't block sidewalks, don't turn your yard into a junkyard. Simple. Human. We fixed the playground, repaired the pool, created a hardship fund for elderly residents, and replaced the compliance department with a volunteer maintenance committee that mostly talks about mulch and barbecue dates. My son still parks his Mustang in the driveway. Sometimes I park my truck a little crooked, not to make a point, just because I'm tired. And every once in a while, I look across the street at the houses I bought, the ones that turned from investments into something bigger, and I think about how close I came to letting one more bully hide behind rules. But here's the part people still argue about. Some neighbors say I went too far. They say buying up homes quietly gave me too much power, even if I used it to stop someone worse. Maybe they're right. Power is power, no matter whose hand it's in. I've thought about that a lot. I don't want to become the thing I fought. So now every major decision goes to open vote. Every dollar is published. Every rule has to pass a fairness review, and nobody gets to govern forever. Because the lesson wasn't that I should be in charge. The lesson was that nobody should be able to rule a neighborhood like a private kingdom. So let me ask you this. Was I wrong for keeping quiet until I had enough power to stop Beverly for good? Should I have spoken up sooner, even if it meant losing? Or is this exactly what happens when decent people get pushed too far by someone who thinks rules only apply to everyone else? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I really want to know where you stand. And if you've ever seen an HOA, a boss, a landlord, or anyone with a little authority use it to humiliate people instead of help them, tell that story too. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with shouting. Sometimes it pulls into the driveway, parks 3 cars in plain sight, and waits for the right meeting.